I stared at the bank statement on my screen, my hand trembling slightly as I scrolled through transaction after transaction. The numbers didn't lie. Our joint savings account had been systematically drained over the past 6 months. Large withdrawals, wire transfers to unknown accounts, all executed while I was supposedly focused on managing our household. My husband Tom had always insisted on handling our investments and major financial decisions. "You're so good with the day-to-day budget, honey," he would say with that patronizing smile I had grown to accept. "Let me worry about the complex stuff." Now I understood why. The first red flag had been a credit card notification, a charge, at the Grand Hyatt downtown on a day Tom was supposedly at a client meeting in Seattle. One suspicious transaction led to another, and soon I found myself diving deep into our financial records, my forgotten forensic accounting training kicking in like muscle memory. Before our marriage, I had been on track to make partner at one of the top accounting firms in the country. Tom had never seemed to fully grasp that, or perhaps he had deliberately chosen to forget it. He preferred to introduce me as his beautiful homemaker wife at company functions, conveniently omitting my master's degree in forensic accounting and my years of experience tracking financial fraud. That expertise was serving me well now as I methodically documented every discrepancy, every hidden transfer, every dollar that had disappeared from our shared future. My hands moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, creating spreadsheets and timelines that would make any auditor proud. Tonight, while Tom was at another late client meeting, I was building a case that would eventually bring his entire world crashing down. A message popped up on my phone, Tom letting me know he'd be working late again. I replied with a supportive message about keeping his dinner warm, maintaining the facade of the dutiful wife he believed me to be. In reality, I was systematically documenting evidence that would not only expose his affair, but uncover something far more damaging: a sophisticated tax evasion scheme that had been operating right under my nose. The more I dug, the clearer the pattern became. Tom hadn't just been hiding an affair. He had been orchestrating a complex financial fraud operation through his consulting business. False invoices, inflated expenses, hidden accounts, all carefully concealed behind a wall of domestic bliss, and his assumption of my financial ignorance. I reached for my wine glass, taking a slow sip of the expensive Bordeaux he always insisted on buying. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using the skills he had dismissed as unnecessary to expose the crimes he thought me incapable of understanding. Each transaction I traced, each document I archived, each pattern I uncovered brought me closer to the moment when his carefully constructed deception would implode. The house was quiet, except for the soft clicking of my keyboard. In our home office, surrounded by the trappings of our supposedly perfect life, I began constructing a parallel digital archive. Every incriminating document was carefully copied, every suspicious transaction logged, every communication that suggested fraud meticulously preserved. I worked with the precision that had once made me a rising star in forensic accounting, skills that had laid dormant but never disappeared. I wasn't just gathering evidence of his infidelity. That was merely the surface of his betrayal. What I was uncovering was a years-long pattern of systematic financial fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering that would interest far more than just our divorce attorney. The very complexity he had used to discourage my involvement in our finances would prove to be his undoing. As midnight approached, I secured my files on an encrypted drive and cleared my browsing history. Tomorrow, I would return to playing the role of the devoted wife, maintaining the illusion that had become our marriage. But now, every dinner I prepared, every social event I organized, every supportive message I sent would serve a larger purpose, buying time while I built an airtight case that would ensure not just my freedom, but his complete accountability. The next morning, I began implementing the first phase of my plan. I needed secure communication channels that couldn't be traced back to our home network. Using cash, I purchased a prepaid phone from a convenience store 30 miles away, carefully, selecting a location without security cameras. I established new email accounts using public computers at different libraries throughout the county, each created with carefully constructed false information. I rented a small safety deposit box at a bank where neither Tom nor I had any accounts, using my maiden name and alternate identification. These weren't the actions of someone lashing out in pain. They were the calculated moves of someone constructing an independent operational framework beyond Tom's awareness or control. By early afternoon, I had completed the security foundations and moved to Phase 2, strategic evidence collection. The copies I'd already made of Tom's financial records provided a comprehensive overview of his fraudulent activities, but successful accountability would require more than just documentation. I needed context, patterns, supporting evidence that would transform isolated documents into a compelling narrative of systematic fraud. Most importantly, I needed to establish clear separation between our financial activities to protect myself from potential implication in his crimes. The joint tax returns we had filed created particular vulnerability. As a cosigner, I could theoretically be held liable for the fraudulent claims they contained. I would need to demonstrate that I had been deliberately excluded from the true financial information, that my signature had been effectively obtained under false pretenses. I began constructing a detailed timeline correlating Tom's documented financial manipulations with his representations to me about our financial status. Email exchanges where I had asked financial questions and received misleading responses, text messages referencing financial decisions that had actually been unilateral actions, calendar entries showing I had been elsewhere during transactions, supposedly conducted jointly. The picture that emerged was comprehensive and damning. The evidence didn't just demonstrate tax fraud, it illustrated the calculated exploitation of marital trust to enable that fraud. Each piece of documentation I gathered strengthened not only the criminal case, but my position as an unwitting victim rather than a co-conspirator. Working methodically through our financial history, I uncovered layers of deception that went far beyond simple tax evasion. Tom had been using his consulting business to orchestrate a sophisticated scheme involving fake invoices, shell companies, and offshore accounts. The complexity was impressive, but it also created vulnerabilities, patterns that would be obvious to anyone with the right training that I happened to possess. I documented everything with meticulous precision, creating backup copies stored in multiple secure locations. Each night after Tom fell asleep, I would spend hours organizing and analyzing the growing body of evidence. The woman he believed was watching reality TV shows was actually building a federal case that would eventually destroy his carefully constructed facade. The hardest part wasn't gathering the evidence. My professional training made that almost second nature. The challenge was maintaining the performance of normal married life, while systematically documenting the destruction of that marriage. Each morning, I would prepare Tom's favorite breakfast, kiss him goodbye, and send him off to work with loving messages. Each evening, I would listen to his lies about client meetings and business challenges, knowing that every word was adding another layer to the case I was building. I became an actress in my own home, playing the role of the trusting wife while secretly dismantling the foundation of our marriage. The performance was exhausting but necessary. Any deviation from my usual behavior might alert Tom that something had changed. His confidence in my financial naivety was my greatest asset, and I intended to maintain that advantage until the moment it would prove his undoing. 2 weeks into my investigation, I reached out to my old colleague, Emma Richardson. We had maintained sporadic contact since my marriage, mostly through holiday cards and occasional social media interactions. Tom had always dismissed these professional connections as cute attempts to keep a foot in the corporate world, another misconception that would work in my favor. I suggested meeting for coffee at a carefully chosen cafe, far from Tom's usual haunts. The location was selected not just for privacy, but for its lack of security cameras and minimal staff. Emma arrived precisely on time, her sharp analytical mind evident in the way she immediately assessed both me and our surroundings. "Just a friendly review," I told her, sliding a USB drive across the table. "I'm thinking about getting back into the field, and I want to make sure my analysis skills haven't completely atrophied. This is a sample case I've been working on. All identifying details removed, of course." Emma raised an eyebrow but asked no questions about the true nature of my request. 3 days later, she called from an unknown number. "Your skills haven't just remained intact," she said without preamble. "They've evolved. The analysis is thorough, methodical, and compelling. If this were a real case, I'd be preparing a referral to the appropriate authorities immediately." The validation was both satisfying and sobering. My suspicions weren't paranoia. They were well-founded conclusions based on concrete evidence. The question now was how to proceed. Traditional divorce proceedings would be insufficient. A standard legal separation would likely result in Tom hiding assets, destroying evidence, and potentially leaving me financially vulnerable despite the prenuptial agreement I had signed, in what now seemed like another lifetime. More importantly, it would allow him to continue defrauding the government and potentially harm others through his ongoing schemes. No, this required precision, strategy, and patience, the kind of calculated response that Tom had never believed me capable of executing. Through Emma, I was introduced to Marcus Whitman, an attorney specializing in both tax law and criminal defense. Our meeting took place in his satellite office, another location carefully chosen for its anonymity. I presented him with a carefully curated selection of the evidence I had gathered. "This is comprehensive," Marcus said, reviewing the documents, with growing interest. "Most clients come to us with suspicions and fragments. You've brought a nearly complete forensic analysis." His tone carried both admiration and curiosity about how a supposedly financially naive housewife had assembled such a thorough case. "I have a master's degree in forensic accounting," I explained simply. "Before my marriage, I worked for one of the top firms in the country. My husband chose to forget that fact. It's proved to be a significant oversight on his part." Marcus nodded, understanding immediately the strategic advantage this created. "The disparity between your actual qualifications and his representation of your financial acumen strengthens the case for deliberate concealment rather than co-conspiracy. This isn't just about exposing fraud. It's about establishing your position as an unwitting victim rather than a willing participant." We spent the next 2 hours developing a strategic approach that would coordinate criminal investigation with civil proceedings. The goal wasn't just to end my marriage or reclaim my financial security. It was to ensure comprehensive accountability for years of systematic fraud. My initial contact with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division was deliberately understated. A secure online submission through their whistleblower portal, providing enough substantive information to warrant attention without revealing my full hand. I used a public library computer in a neighboring county, having thoroughly researched the facility to confirm the absence of security cameras. The submission included sample documentation of clear tax fraud, carefully selected to demonstrate both the significance of the case and the credibility of the source. Each document had been scrubbed of metadata that might contain identifying information. Each example was chosen to demonstrate pattern without revealing my comprehensive understanding of Tom's operations. 3 days after the submission, the anonymous email account received its first response, a standardized acknowledgement indicating the information had been received and was under preliminary review. The message included a case reference number and secure protocols for further communication. This seemingly minor development represented a significant tactical victory. The assignment of a case number confirmed that my submission had cleared initial screening. Special Agent David Chen was assigned to the case. Our early communications maintained my anonymity while establishing the scope and significance of Tom's fraudulent activities. Chen's questions focused on verifying the authenticity of documents, establishing the mechanisms of the fraudulent schemes, and determining the full financial scope of the evasion. "This isn't just tax evasion," Chen noted during one of our secure calls. "There are elements here that suggest money laundering, wire fraud, and potentially even securities violations. The jurisdictional overlap makes this case particularly significant." I provided detailed responses that demonstrated knowledge while carefully avoiding information that would prematurely reveal my identity or relationship to Tom. Each exchange built credibility and competence that would prove valuable in later phases. Meanwhile, I maintained my performance at home with unwavering discipline. The morning after receiving Chen's initial response, I prepared Tom's favorite breakfast, listened to his latest lies about client meetings, and sent him off to work with a loving kiss. Each domestic act now served a larger strategic purpose. Maintaining his confidence while the investigation quietly built momentum. The duality of my existence became increasingly surreal. By day, I was the supportive wife Tom had always taken for granted. By night, I was methodically constructing the case that would destroy everything he had built. The very skills he had dismissed as unnecessary for a housewife were becoming the instruments of his destruction. After 2 weeks of secure communications, Agent Chen proposed an in-person meeting. This represented both opportunity and risk. Direct interaction would significantly advance the investigation, but would necessarily compromise my anonymity. The timing aligned with my strategic framework. The preliminary investigation had progressed sufficiently to establish the legitimacy of the case. We met at a federal building in a city 3 hours from our home, selected specifically for its security protocols and absence of connection to either Tom's business activities or our personal lives. Marcus accompanied me as legal counsel, his presence providing both professional guidance and additional credibility. The 4-hour meeting transformed the investigation from preliminary inquiry to formal case development. I provided comprehensive documentation of Tom's fraudulent activities, tax returns with false deductions, bank records showing income diversion, evidence of shell companies used for artificial loss generation, and documentation of my own exclusion from these financial decisions. This is one of the most thoroughly documented initial presentations I've encountered in 15 years of financial investigations, Chen's supervisor noted after reviewing the materials. The organization and analysis reflect professional-level understanding of both tax requirements and forensic documentation. I have a master's degree in accounting with specialization in forensic analysis, I explained, revealing my professional background for the first time. Before my marriage, I worked for one of the top firms in their financial advisory services division. This disclosure visibly shifted their assessment not just of the evidence, but of me as a witness. The sophisticated analysis they had attributed to professional assistance was suddenly contextualized as the work of someone with relevant expertise, deliberately applying their skills to documenting criminal activity. I provided a final piece of critical information. Details about upcoming financial transactions Tom had scheduled that would move substantial assets offshore through his established laundering channels. This time-sensitive intelligence would allow the IRS to observe and document active fraud, rather than relying solely on historical evidence. This creates an opportunity for real-time surveillance and potential intervention, Agent Chen noted. Immediately, recognizing the strategic value of the information, it significantly strengthens the case for immediate investigative escalation. As I left the federal building that afternoon, I felt a profound shift in momentum. What had begun as documentation of personal betrayal had evolved into a comprehensive federal case. The systems were in place, the evidence secured, the strategies defined. The time had come to move from preparation to action. Through Marcus's connections, I was introduced to Brandon Michaels, a forensic asset recovery specialist whose firm specialized in locating and reclaiming misappropriated funds. Our initial meeting revealed the true scope of Tom's financial deception. Based On the documentation you've shown me, we're looking at multi-layered concealment strategies, Brandon observed, reviewing the financial records. The offshore structures, particularly the Liechtenstein and Singapore connections, suggest sophisticated attempts to distance assets from their origins. Brandon's team uncovered a property I hadn't known existed, a beachfront villa purchased, through a layered ownership structure that appeared designed as a potential escape option rather than an investment. The timing of the purchase, shortly after I discovered Tom's affair, raised significant concerns about his long-term intentions. I maintained meticulous notes about each discovery, documenting not just the financial details, but the methodology used to uncover them. Every transaction we traced, every hidden account we identified, added another layer to the federal case while simultaneously strengthening my position in the impending divorce proceedings. The most shocking discovery came when Brandon's team identified a pattern of systematic diversion of client funds. Tom hadn't just been evading taxes. He had been misappropriating money from his consulting clients, using his position of trust to orchestrate a sophisticated embezzlement scheme. This elevates the case significantly, Marcus advised when I shared the findings. We're no longer just looking at personal tax fraud. This pattern of client fund misappropriation could trigger additional federal charges and potentially state-level prosecution. Each new revelation required careful integration into my strategic timeline. The federal investigation needed to move quickly enough to prevent asset dissipation, but methodically enough to document every aspect of the fraud. Meanwhile, I continued my daily performance as the dutiful wife, maintaining the facade that allowed this investigation to proceed without alerting Tom. The strain of living this double life was considerable, but my forensic training provided an unexpected advantage. I had been taught to maintain professional detachment when analyzing financial crimes. Those same skills now helped me separate the emotional impact of Tom's betrayal from the technical process of documenting his crimes. Agent Chen's investigation uncovered a digital trail that exceeded even my thorough documentation. Tom's overconfidence in his technical abilities had led him to keep detailed records of every fraudulent transaction, apparently believing his password protection and encryption methods were unbreakable. The arrogance that had characterized his dismissal of my financial capabilities extended to his belief in his technological superiority. "He's made a classic mistake," Chen explained during one of our secure briefings, held in a small conference room at the Federal Building. Instead of minimizing his digital footprint, he's created an extensive documentation system that effectively maps out his entire criminal enterprise. His attempts at security are sophisticated but ultimately flawed. The investigation revealed Tom had been maintaining parallel sets of books, one for official business purposes and another tracking his actual financial operations. The second set, discovered on an encrypted server he accessed through a virtual private network, provided a comprehensive record of his fraudulent activities dating back nearly 5 years. It was a treasure trove of evidence that would prove impossible to explain away as simple accounting errors or misunderstandings. Each entry was meticulously categorized and cross-referenced. Tom had created elaborate spreadsheets tracking every aspect of his fraud: fake invoices generated for non-existent consulting services, manipulated expense reports inflating business costs, detailed records of funds moved through his network of shell companies. He had even maintained a separate ledger, calculating the exact percentages of client payments diverted to his offshore accounts. The level of detail was astounding. Tom had documented meeting dates with the bank representatives who helped him establish his offshore accounts, including their names and contact information. He kept precise records of which expenses were legitimate and which were fabricated, apparently to ensure he didn't accidentally claim the same false deduction twice. There were even notes about which clients were most likely to question invoice details and how to handle their inquiries. These records eliminate any possibility of claiming accounting errors or misunderstandings, Marcus noted when reviewing the findings in his office one evening. The level of detail and deliberate calculation demonstrates clear intent and systematic fraud. It's exactly the kind of evidence prosecutors dream of finding. The digital trail revealed another layer of Tom's character that I hadn't fully appreciated during our marriage. Behind the confident, successful consultant facade was a man so obsessed with control that he had to document every aspect of his crimes. His need to maintain perfect records, to track every fraudulent dollar, spoke to a compulsive personality that couldn't leave anything to chance. Most damning were his personal notes scattered throughout the files. Comments about how certain clients were too stupid to check the details, or how accounting departments were easily fooled by technical jargon, revealed the contempt he held for the people who trusted him. These weren't just financial records. They were a psychological profile of a man who believed himself intellectually superior to everyone around him. I found myself analyzing these discoveries with the same detachment I had once applied to forensic cases in my professional life. Each new file we uncovered, each layer of fraud we documented, reinforced the correctness of my approach. The man who had dismissed my financial acumen as unnecessary had created the perfect evidence trail for his own prosecution. Tom's digital security measures, while sophisticated on the surface, revealed the same fundamental flaw that characterized his entire approach to fraud, an unshakable belief in his own superiority. He had used complex encryption protocols and multiple layers of password protection, but had then stored all his access codes in a secure file on the same server. His absolute confidence that no one could break his security had led him to create a single point of failure that compromised everything. The irony was profound. Tom's compulsive need to document everything, combined with his absolute confidence in his superior intelligence, had created the perfect tool for his own destruction. The man who believed himself too clever to be caught had effectively written his own confession, creating a body of evidence so comprehensive that it would leave no room for legal maneuvering or claims of innocence. As I sat in my secure apartment that evening, reviewing the latest findings from Chen's team, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was satisfaction, certainly, in seeing Tom's arrogance become his undoing. But there was also a deep sadness in recognizing the full extent of his deception. The digital trail revealed not just financial fraud, but a profound moral bankruptcy, a willingness to betray not just me, but everyone who trusted him. Brandon's team made their most significant breakthrough in late October, unraveling the complex web of Tom's offshore accounts. What had initially appeared to be an impenetrable maze of shell companies and numbered accounts revealed itself as a surprisingly predictable pattern of financial movements. The sophistication that Tom had relied upon for concealment became the very thing that made his schemes traceable. "He's using a classic layering technique," Brandon explained during our secure meeting, spreading out diagrams showing interconnected entities across 6 countries. Money moves from his consulting business through a series of seemingly legitimate transactions, each designed to obscure the original source. But he's repeated the same pattern so many times, it's created a traceable signature. Look at this sequence. The diagram showed how client payments would enter Tom's business accounts, then split into multiple streams. Exactly 40% would begin a choreographed dance through various shell companies, while the remaining 60% stayed in his legitimate business operations. The offshore portion would bounce through accounts in Singapore, Switzerland, and the Cayman Islands before ultimately landing in numbered accounts in Liechtenstein. "What's fascinating," Brandon continued, pulling up detailed transaction records, "is how methodical he's been. Every transfer follows the exact same percentages, uses the same intermediary banks, even processes at the same time of month. He's created a system so precise, it's basically a roadmap for investigators." The investigation revealed Tom had established relationships with specific banks known for their discretion, using the same formation agents to create his shell companies in each jurisdiction. His preference for systematic organization, which had served him well in building his consulting business, had inadvertently created clear patterns that Brandon's team could trace and document. "Most sophisticated financial criminals vary their methods," Brandon explained. They change percentages, use different banks, alter their timing to avoid creating patterns. Your husband's need for control and order led him to create a system so consistent it's practically a signature. Once we identified the pattern in one transaction chain, we could predict exactly where the money would move next. This predictability proved invaluable for both the criminal case and asset recovery efforts. We could now anticipate where funds would move and intervene before they disappeared into harder-to-trace accounts. More importantly, we could demonstrate that these weren't isolated incidents or accounting errors, but part of a deliberate, systematic scheme operating consistently over years. The offshore investigation also revealed something unexpected: a series of accounts established in my name without my knowledge. Tom had used copies of my identification documents collected during our marriage to create parallel financial structures I had never known existed. This discovery strengthened both the criminal case against him and my position as an unwitting victim rather than a co-conspirator. This is signature behavior of someone who believes they'll never be caught, Agent Chen commented when briefed on these findings. The same characteristics that made your husband successful in business, his attention to detail, his systematic approach, his need for control, have created the perfect evidence trail. Instead of making his fraud harder to detect, his methodical nature has given us everything we need to prove intent and pattern. The discovery of my unauthorized accounts added new charges to the growing list of federal violations. Identity theft, wire fraud, and bank fraud would now join tax evasion and money laundering in the prosecution's arsenal. Each new revelation seemed to unlock another layer of Tom's deception, revealing the true scope of his criminal enterprise. As Brandon's team continued mapping the offshore network, they uncovered evidence suggesting Tom had been preparing for potential discovery. Several recent transactions indicated attempts to move assets into jurisdictions with no extradition treaties with the United States. The timing of these movements, coinciding with the period after I discovered his affair, suggested he had been developing contingency plans. This demonstrates consciousness of guilt, Marcus noted during our next strategy session. These aren't normal business transactions or tax planning measures. They're classic flight capital movements, preparing for a worst-case scenario where he needs to escape prosecution. This will be particularly relevant when we discuss bail conditions. The investigation took a disturbing turn when we discovered the full extent of Tom's manipulation of client funds. What had initially appeared to be straightforward tax evasion revealed itself as a complex scheme involving systematic misappropriation of money from the very businesses that trusted him to improve their financial efficiency. Our analysis showed that Tom had created an elaborate system of double billing and fee manipulation. The invoices his clients received never matched the amounts recorded in his hidden books. The difference, consistently 20 to 30% of each payment, was automatically diverted through a sophisticated software system that Tom had personally designed to manage his fraud. He's created what amounts to an automated skimming operation, Agent Chen explained during an emergency briefing at the federal building. The system intercepts client payments before they hit the official books, strips out a predetermined percentage, and generates falsified records showing the lower amount. The diverted funds are immediately routed through his offshore network, making them almost impossible for clients to trace. The scheme was particularly insidious because it exploited the trust his clients placed in him as their financial efficiency expert. Tom had often suggested changes to their payment and accounting systems, changes that we now realized were specifically designed to facilitate his fraud. He had effectively used his position as a trusted advisor to install the very mechanisms that allowed him to steal from them. This is beyond simple fraud, Marcus advised during our review of the findings. Each modified accounting system, each diverted payment, each falsified record represents a separate federal offense. We're looking at potential RICO charges given the systematic nature and duration of the scheme. The fact that he used his professional expertise to enable the fraud will likely be an aggravating factor in sentencing. The client fraud investigation revealed another layer of Tom's character that I hadn't fully appreciated. The contempt he showed for my financial capabilities extended to his clients as well. His hidden records included notes mocking their trust. In him, detailed observations about which clients were least likely to notice discrepancies and strategies for deflecting any questions that arose. "Look at this pattern," Brandon pointed out, displaying a timeline of client acquisitions and system modifications. Every time he brought on a new client, he would first implement what he called efficiency improvements to their payment systems. These weren't improvements at all. They were deliberately created vulnerabilities that allowed his skimming software to operate undetected. The discovery of client fraud created new challenges for the investigation. These weren't just crimes against the government. There were real victims whose businesses had been compromised by someone they trusted. Many of Tom's clients were small to medium-sized businesses that had invested significant resources in his consulting services, believing they were improving their financial operations. "We need to approach this aspect of the case carefully," Agent Chen advised. "When this becomes public, these businesses will face their own challenges, explaining to shareholders, addressing potential audit issues, managing public relations. Our prosecution needs to balance the need for justice with minimizing additional harm to the victims." The client fraud evidence provided another advantage in building the criminal case. While tax evasion could sometimes be explained away as aggressive, tax planning or accounting errors, the systematic theft from clients demonstrated clear criminal intent. The sophisticated methods Tom had employed to conceal these thefts, the custom software, the modified accounting systems, the elaborate money movement schemes, all pointed to premeditated, deliberate fraud. Each client relationship will need to be carefully documented, Marcus explained. "We're not just proving financial crimes now. We're demonstrating a pattern of exploiting professional trust for criminal gain. This transforms the narrative from financial misconduct to a fundamental breach of fiduciary duty." As we delved deeper into the client records, we discovered that Tom had even created a rating system for his victims. Clients were categorized based on their likelihood of detecting fraud, their financial sophistication, and their potential value as targets. The clinical nature of these assessments, the cold calculation behind each decision, revealed a level of predatory behavior that went beyond simple financial gain. This kind of systematic victim classification is rarely seen outside of major criminal enterprises, Agent Chen noted. It demonstrates not just criminal intent, but a sophisticated understanding of victim psychology and exploitation techniques. The premeditation evident in these records will be particularly damning in court. Brandon's asset recovery team made a critical discovery in early November, a property that existed completely outside Tom's known financial records. Hidden behind layers of shell companies and trust arrangements, the beachfront villa in a remote Caribbean location represented something more concerning than simple tax evasion. This was an escape plan, carefully constructed and maintained in absolute secrecy. The property purchase shows a completely different pattern from his other assets, Brandon explained, spreading out satellite imagery and ownership documentation across the conference room table. Everything else in his portfolio, even the fraudulent investments, maintained some connection to his legitimate business operations. This property was acquired through a completely separate structure, using funds that never touched his known accounts. The timing of the purchase proved particularly significant. The initial property acquisition had occurred just weeks after I discovered Tom's affair, suggesting a direct connection to his growing fear of exposure. But the preparation had begun much earlier. The shell companies used to obscure ownership had been established months before, indicating a level of premeditation that spoke to Tom's true character. "Look at how the ownership is structured," Brandon continued, displaying a complex diagram of interconnected entities. The property title is held by a shell company in the British Virgin Islands, which is owned by a trust in Guernsey, which is controlled by a foundation in Panama. Each layer is designed to make tracing ownership nearly impossible. More importantly, each jurisdiction was specifically chosen for its resistance to international law enforcement cooperation. The investigation revealed that Tom had made several quiet visits to the property over the past year, always during supposed business trips to other locations. He had established local banking relationships, made connections with influential local figures, and begun the process of securing long-term residency rights. The villa itself had been steadily stocked with supplies, including significant amounts of cash in various currencies. "This isn't a vacation home or an investment property," Agent Chen observed during our review of the findings. "This is a bolt hole, a prepared escape destination with everything needed for long-term residence beyond the reach of U.S. law enforcement." The level of preparation suggests he always knew his schemes might eventually unravel. The discovery of the hidden property created new urgency in our timeline. Tom had demonstrated both the means and the preparation for potential flight. His recent financial activities showed increasing movements of funds toward the Caribbean location, suggesting he might be accelerating his contingency plans. "We need to move carefully but quickly," Marcus advised during an emergency strategy session. "The existence of this property significantly changes our risk assessment. Every day we wait increases the possibility that he might attempt to flee. However, we need to ensure all our documentation is completely in order before moving to the arrest phase." The property investigation revealed another layer of Tom's deception that struck particularly close to home. The funds used to purchase and maintain the villa had come directly from our joint accounts, money that I had believed was being invested for our retirement. The discovery added another dimension to his betrayal. While dismissing my concerns about our financial future, he had been systematically diverting our shared resources to fund his escape plan. This creates additional leverage in both the criminal case and divorce proceedings, Jennifer noted. The use of joint marital assets to prepare for potential flight from prosecution demonstrates both criminal intent and breach of fiduciary duty to you as his spouse. It strengthens our position for both asset recovery and criminal charges. As Brandon's team continued mapping the property's financial connections, they uncovered evidence suggesting Tom had recently accelerated his preparations. New furniture had been delivered, additional supplies purchased, and significant funds moved to local banks. The pattern suggested someone preparing for imminent occupancy rather than maintaining a long-term contingency plan. "These recent activities change our tactical considerations," Agent Chen explained during our next secure briefing. "The acceleration in preparation activities suggests he may be responding to some perceived threat. We need to consider whether he's detected any aspect of our investigation or if other factors are driving this timing." As the investigation entered its final phases, I focused on securing my own position. Working with Jennifer, I began systematically separating my financial identity from Tom's criminal enterprise. This required careful timing. Any sudden changes in our joint accounts might alert him that something was amiss. "We need to establish clear financial separation without triggering his suspicion," Jennifer advised during a secure meeting in her satellite office. "The goal is to protect your assets while maintaining the appearance of normal marital financial patterns. One wrong move could compromise everything we've built." I began liquidating personal assets that predated our marriage. Jewelry inherited from my grandmother, investments established during my early career, artwork purchased with my own funds. Each transaction was carefully structured to avoid generating notifications that might reach Tom. The proceeds were converted to bearer instruments or moved to new accounts established under my maiden name at institutions where Tom had no connections. The psychological preparation proved equally challenging. Living with someone while orchestrating their downfall creates unique emotional strain. Each morning, I would transform from strategic architect to supportive wife, shifting my language patterns and body language to maintain the persona Tom expected. Each evening, I would reverse the transformation, setting aside the performance to engage with my network of professionals through secure channels. The cognitive demands of this sustained performance are substantial, Dr. Sarah Levine noted during one of our sessions. A therapist specializing in complex divorce situations, she had become essential to maintaining my psychological balance. You're essentially operating as a deep cover agent in your own home, maintaining a convincing facade while pursuing completely different objectives than those you're presenting. The performance wasn't merely passive deception, it required active engagement with Tom's continuing betrayals. When he called to explain he'd be working late while his location tracker showed him at a hotel, I expressed appropriate understanding. When he mentioned business expenses that I knew were personal indulgences with his mistress, I asked suitable questions about the fictional clients involved. Each interaction required delicate calibration, showing enough interest to seem engaged, but not so much as to trigger suspicion. The duality extended beyond interpersonal dynamics into practical logistics. I maintained two distinct sets of records, communication systems, and daily schedules. My visible calendar showed household management, social engagements, and volunteer activities. My hidden calendar tracked meeting times with federal investigators, legal consultations, and financial recovery planning sessions. This separation required rigorous attention to detail. Devices used for secure communications never entered our home. Documents related to the investigation remained in physically separated secure locations. All scheduling was designed to ensure my visible activities provided plausible cover for my actual movements. Your operational security measures would impress most intelligence professionals, Marcus commented during one of our coordination meetings. The separation between your visible and covert activities is remarkably comprehensive. The most challenging aspect wasn't the practical logistics or the performance requirements. It was the fundamental ethical navigation required. I was simultaneously upholding and violating traditional marriage expectations, pursuing justice through methods that required controlled deception, balancing personal accountability with strategic patience. Dr. Levine provided essential guidance through this ethical complexity. What you're experiencing is a form of necessary compartmentalization, she explained. You're not maintaining this dual existence from malice or manipulation. You're creating a controlled environment for accountability that wouldn't be possible through more conventional approaches. This framing helped reconcile the apparent contradictions in my position. The performance wasn't betrayal, but containment, creating a stable situation where evidence could be properly documented and appropriate legal processes engaged. The deception wasn't vindictive but protective, preventing premature disruption that would compromise legitimate accountability. The complexity of Tom's criminal enterprise required expanding our investigative network. Each new discovery revealed additional dimensions that needed specialized expertise to properly document and address. Through Marcus's professional connections, we carefully assembled a team of experts, each focused on specific aspects of the case. Patricia Reynolds, a forensic data analyst specializing in financial software systems, joined the team to examine Tom's custom-designed skimming software. Her analysis revealed sophisticated programming that automatically intercepted and redirected funds while generating false documentation to conceal the theft. This isn't off-the-shelf malware, Patricia explained during a secure briefing. The code shows professional-level development skills, with specific customization for each client's accounting system. The sophistication of the software demonstrates both premeditation and technical expertise in service of fraud. Dr. James Morton, an expert in psychological profiling of white-collar criminals, provided valuable insights into Tom's behavioral patterns. His analysis helped us anticipate potential reactions as the investigation progressed, identifying likely pressure points and risk factors for flight or destruction of evidence. Your husband exhibits classic characteristics of what we call a productive psychopath, Dr. Morton explained. His success in business isn't despite his criminal tendencies. It's partially because of them. The same traits that make him effective in corporate environments, charm, confidence, strategic thinking, also enable his fraudulent activities. The profile Dr. Morton developed proved remarkably accurate in predicting Tom's responses to increasing pressure. As we monitored his activities, we observed exactly the pattern progression the profile had suggested. Increased working hours, more frequent communication with offshore contacts, subtle changes in his interaction patterns with clients. Financial intelligence specialist Maria Gonzalez joined Brandon's team, focusing specifically on Tom's international money movements. Her expertise in cross-border transactions helped identify patterns that might indicate preparation for flight or attempted asset concealment. "He's showing classic pre-flight behavior," Maria reported during an emergency update. The recent increase in funds moving toward his Caribbean haven, combined with new patterns of communication with local contacts there, suggests he's preparing for potential rapid departure. The timeline for intervention may need to be accelerated. Each new team member was carefully vetted and compartmentalized, working through secure channels with access only to information directly relevant to their specialty. This compartmentalization served dual purposes: protecting operational security while creating independent expert witnesses who could testify to specific aspects of Tom's crimes. The diversity of expertise we've assembled strengthens the case. Significantly, Marcus noted. Each specialist brings not only technical knowledge, but professional credibility that will be valuable in court. Their independent analyses, arriving at consistent conclusions, create compelling evidence of systematic criminal activity. The network expansion required additional security measures. Team members used encrypted communication channels, met in rotating secure locations, and followed strict protocols to prevent any information leakage that might alert Tom to the investigation. Despite the complexity of managing this growing operation, the professional discipline of each expert helped maintain perfect operational security. What's remarkable, Agent Chen observed, is how each new specialist's findings reinforce and expand upon previous discoveries. The technical analysis supports the psychological profile, which explains the financial patterns, which confirm the behavioral predictions. It's creating a comprehensive picture of sophisticated, long-term criminal enterprise. The expanding network also provided unexpected emotional support. Each expert, working in their own specialty, helped validate my experience of Tom's deception. Their professional analysis confirmed what I had initially discovered through personal betrayal, that Tom's crimes weren't just against me, but represented a fundamental pattern of exploitation and fraud. Patricia Reynolds's analysis of Tom's technical infrastructure revealed a level of sophistication that exceeded our initial assessments. The custom software he had developed to manage his fraudulent operations wasn't just a tool for theft. It was a comprehensive system designed to automate every aspect of his criminal enterprise. The architecture is remarkable, Patricia explained, displaying complex diagrams of interconnected systems. He's created what amounts to an automated fraud ecosystem. The software doesn't just process individual transactions, it manages entire fictional business relationships, generates supporting documentation, and maintains consistent false narratives across multiple platforms. The technical investigation revealed that Tom had developed separate modules for different aspects of his fraud. One system handled the initial skimming of client funds, automatically calculating percentages to divert while generating false records of the original transactions. Another managed the movement of money through his network of offshore accounts, timing transfers to avoid detection patterns that might trigger bank security algorithms. "Look at this code structure," Patricia pointed out during a detailed review session. He's implemented sophisticated error checking and redundancy. If any transaction fails or generates unexpected patterns, the system automatically adjusts subsequent movements to maintain the appearance of normal business operations. It's like watching a self-correcting criminal enterprise. Most disturbing was the discovery of what Patricia called the narrative management system, a sophisticated program that generated and maintained consistent false documentation across all aspects of Tom's operations. This system created fictional meeting notes, email trails, and business records that supported his fraudulent activities, automatically adjusting details to maintain consistency with actual events. "The level of detail is extraordinary," she noted, scrolling through examples. If he creates a false consulting engagement to justify fraudulent billing, the system automatically generates everything from initial client contact emails to meeting schedules to progress reports. Every document is dated appropriately, includes realistic details from actual business activities, and maintains perfect consistency with other records. The technical evidence proved particularly valuable for the criminal case. The sophisticated nature of the software, combined with its clear purpose of enabling and concealing fraud, demonstrated both premeditation and ongoing intent. Each module, each carefully coded function, represented additional proof that Tom's crimes were not mistakes or misunderstandings, but deliberate, systematic fraud. "This is far beyond typical financial crime technology," Agent Chen observed during a briefing on Patricia's findings. "Most financial criminals use existing software, perhaps modified for their purposes. Creating custom systems of this complexity demonstrates both long-term planning and a clear understanding that the activities being automated were criminal in nature." The investigation also revealed that Tom had integrated his fraud management system with legitimate business software used by his clients. He had essentially created a parallel shadow system that intercepted and modified data before it reached official records, while maintaining detailed logs of both the actual and manipulated figures. "The integration points are particularly damning," Patricia explained. "Each connection to legitimate business systems required specific coding to handle the interception and modification of data. There's no possibility of claiming these were automatic system functions or unintended interactions. Each point of contact required deliberate programming specifically designed to enable fraud." Most significant was the discovery of Tom's personal notes embedded in the code comments. These technical annotations, never intended to be seen by others, revealed his thought process and intentions with stark clarity. Comments like "intercept," "before audit trigger," and "modify dates to avoid detection pattern" provided clear evidence of criminal intent. "Code comments are like a programmer's diary," Patricia noted. "They're typically written as notes to oneself or other developers, without consideration for external review. The comments in this code effectively document the criminal purpose of each function, often with remarkable candor about the intended deception." The technical evidence also revealed Tom's contingency planning. Hidden within the system were sophisticated data destruction protocols designed to activate under specific conditions, such as unauthorized access attempts or official investigations. This discovery led to immediate action to secure and preserve the evidence before any automatic deletion could occur. Most significant was the discovery of Tom's personal notes embedded in the code comments. These technical annotations, never intended to be seen by others, revealed his thought process and intentions with stark clarity. Comments like "intercept," "before audit trigger," and "modify dates to avoid detection pattern" provided clear evidence of criminal intent. "Code comments are like a programmer's diary," Patricia noted. "They're typically written as notes to oneself or other developers, without consideration for external review. The comments in this code effectively document the criminal purpose of each function, often with remarkable candor about the intended deception." The technical evidence also revealed Tom's contingency planning. Hidden within the system were sophisticated data destruction protocols designed to activate under specific conditions such as unauthorized access attempts or official investigations. This discovery led to immediate action to secure and preserve the evidence before any automatic deletion could occur. The catalyst for accelerating our timeline came from an unexpected source. A routine audit at one of Tom's client companies flagged several unusual transactions, triggering closer scrutiny of his consulting fees. This seemingly minor development created ripple effects that threatened to unravel his entire operation prematurely. "The auditors are asking questions we can't easily deflect," Tom told me one evening, his usual confidence showing cracks for the first time. "They're requesting documentation that might expose some creative accounting practices." The strain in his voice was evident as he paced our kitchen, phone constantly in hand. I maintained my supportive wife performance while carefully observing every detail of his deteriorating composure. His hands shook slightly when checking messages. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed sleepless nights. The perfectly pressed shirts and immaculate grooming that had been his trademark showed signs of neglect. Agent Chen immediately recognized the strategic importance of this development. The audit creates pressure we didn't anticipate. If he tries to cover one set of fraudulent transactions, he risks exposing others. It's a cascade effect we can potentially leverage. Through our surveillance, we observed Tom making increasingly frantic moves to contain the situation. Late-night calls to offshore accounts increased. Large sums began moving through his transfer networks with less than his usual caution. The precision that had characterized his criminal enterprise was giving way to desperation. "He's deviating from established patterns," Brandon reported during an emergency briefing. "The careful systems he built are breaking down under pressure. These rushed transactions are creating clearer evidence trails than anything we've seen before." Dr. Morton's psychological profile proved eerily accurate. When meticulous control personalities face system collapse, they often respond with increasingly risky behaviors. The need to maintain the appearance of control overwhelms their usual caution. The pressure began manifesting in subtle changes at home. Tom's dismissive attitude toward my financial questions shifted to irritable deflection. His usual elaborate explanations about work became terse, defensive responses. The performance of perfect marriage became harder to maintain as his facade cracked. I documented every change, every deviation from normal patterns. Each observation was carefully logged and transmitted to our investigative team through secure channels. The breaking point we had anticipated was approaching faster than our original timeline had planned. "We need to accelerate our preparations," Marcus advised during a late-night secure call. "His current behavior suggests he might make sudden moves to either conceal assets or attempt flight. Our window for controlled intervention is closing, the TU." Technical surveillance confirmed our concerns. Patricia's monitoring of his systems showed increased activity in his data destruction protocols. "He's preparing contingencies," she warned. "The automated systems are being modified to erase evidence if certain triggers occur." The carefully coordinated dance I had maintained for months, playing the supportive wife while documenting his downfall, became increasingly difficult as Tom's behavior grew more erratic. Each interaction required more intense focus to maintain the performance while gathering crucial intelligence about his deteriorating control. Dr. Levine helped me navigate this intensified psychological strain. "You're in the most dangerous phase," she cautioned. "As his systems break down, his ability to recognize subtle changes in your behavior may actually increase. Maintaining consistent performance under this pressure is crucial but extremely demanding." The acceleration of events required immediate adaptation of our strategy. Agent Chen coordinated with multiple federal agencies to prepare for rapid intervention. Search warrants were drafted and reviewed, enforcement teams briefed, and surveillance increased on all known locations connected to Tom's operations. "We're seeing increased activity at his Caribbean property," Brandon reported. "Local contacts confirm new deliveries of supplies and equipment. The pattern suggests preparation for extended occupancy rather than occasional use." Jennifer accelerated the divorce filing preparation, ensuring all documents were ready for immediate submission once federal action began. "The timing has to be precise," she emphasized. "We need to establish court jurisdiction over assets before any potential flight attempt, but we can't move so early that it triggers premature reactions." I maintained my complex performance with heightened vigilance, knowing any slip in my carefully constructed facade could now have devastating consequences. Each morning, I prepared Tom's coffee exactly as he liked it. maintained light conversation about household matters, and projected calm normalcy while secretly documenting every indication of his growing instability. The strain of this intensified. Deception manifested in subtle ways. I developed a persistent tension headache. My hands would shake slightly after particularly intense interactions with Tom. Sleep became increasingly difficult as the weight of maintaining this dual existence grew heavier. "Your physiological responses are normal," Dr. Levine assured me during an emergency session. This level of sustained performance under increasing pressure would affect anyone. The key is acknowledging these stress responses while maintaining operational discipline. The technical team worked around the clock to counter Tom's erratic system activities. Patricia implemented sophisticated monitoring to detect any attempt at mass data deletion. "He's modified his destruction protocols," she reported. "The triggers are becoming more sensitive. We need to be prepared for sudden system purges." Most concerning were the changes in Tom's interaction with his offshore accounts. Maria's tracking showed increasingly large transfers moving through his network, often outside his usual carefully planned patterns. "He's sacrificing security for speed," she noted. "The transactions are becoming easier to trace but harder to predict or prevent." Agent Chen coordinated final preparations with tactical teams. "Based on his recent patterns and psychological profile, we expect he'll either attempt to flee or initiate evidence destruction within the next 72 hours. All teams need to be ready for immediate deployment." The federal response plan was comprehensive. Simultaneous execution of search warrants at our home, his office, and 3 storage locations, coordinated freeze orders for all identified accounts, immediate seizure of all electronic devices and records. The timing had to be perfect, early enough to prevent escape or evidence destruction, but late enough to ensure all criminal activity was properly documented. I packed a small bag with essentials and secured it in my private storage unit, ready for immediate departure once federal action began. The emotional preparation was more challenging than the practical. Despite knowing the necessity of these actions, despite having documented years of criminal behavior, the finality of these preparations carried its own weight. "Remember, Dr. Levine counseled, what you're feeling isn't just about ending a marriage. It's about transitioning from a long-term undercover role back to your authentic self. That transition carries significant psychological impact." The final pieces of our strategy fell into place as Tom's behavior became increasingly erratic. His usual methodical nature gave way to obvious anxiety. Late-night phone calls in hushed tones became frequent. His careful documentation of transactions grew sloppy. The perfect facade he had maintained for years showed clear signs of imminent collapse. The federal action began at precisely 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I had been awake since 4:30, moving through my normal routine with deliberate calm while monitoring the final preparations through secure channels. Tom slept soundly, unaware that dozens of federal agents were taking position around our home and his office. The doorbell rang at 6:01. I was in the kitchen, deliberately positioned away from the initial confrontation point as we had planned. Through the kitchen door, I heard Tom's footsteps in the hallway, followed by the clear, authoritative voice of Agent Chen. "Federal agents with a search warrant." The next few moments unfolded exactly as our tactical planning had anticipated. Tom's initial response was confident indignation, his default response to any challenge. "There must be some mistake," he declared, his voice carrying that familiar tone of aristocratic certainty that had once seemed impressive, but now sounded hollow. I remained in the kitchen, following the carefully established protocol for these initial moments. My role was not to witness Tom's first confrontation with consequences, but to maintain appropriate distance until the situation was fully secured. Through the door, I heard multiple voices, professional, measured instructions from the agents, Tom's increasingly agitated responses as reality began penetrating his comprehension. Agent Chen's voice remained steady, professional. "Mr. Harrison, We are executing federal search warrants related to an investigation into tax fraud, wire fraud, and potential securities violations. Simultaneous warrants are being executed at your office location, storage facilities, and other properties associated with your financial activities. The comprehensive nature of the enforcement action registered in Tom's voice, the first crack in his confident facade. This wasn't a misunderstanding or isolated inquiry, but a coordinated federal case built on substantial evidence. "This is outrageous," he sputtered, but the trademark authority had drained from his voice. "I demand to speak with my attorney immediately." 7 minutes after the initial entry, exactly the time frame Agent Chen had indicated would be required. For preliminary security, a female agent knocked on the kitchen door. "Mrs. Harrison, I'm Special Agent Torres. The situation is secure now. We'd like you to join us in the living room." I entered the living room to find Tom seated on the sofa, his expression cycling rapidly between disbelief, anger, and calculation. 4 agents moved efficiently through the house, following the detailed search protocols developed through months of preparation. Agent Chen stood nearby, observing both the search progress and Tom's reactions with professional detachment. The moment of revelation came precisely as we had choreographed it. Tom looked up as I entered, his expression shifting immediately to what he clearly thought was reassuring authority. "Rachel, call Jeffrey immediately. These people are making a terrible mistake." Before I could respond, Agent Chen stepped forward, professional but direct. "Mr. Harrison, there's something else you should know. Mrs. Harrison has been cooperating with our investigation. The initial evidence that led to this case came through her disclosure of financial irregularities she discovered." The statement hung in the air between us, simple, direct, transformative in its implications. Tom stared at me, his expression cycling through disbelief, betrayal, and then a dawning comprehension that reconfigured his entire understanding of our relationship. "That's not possible," he said finally, his voice strained with effort to maintain control. "Rachel doesn't understand complex financial matters. She couldn't possibly—" "I have a master's degree in accounting with specialization in forensic analysis," I stated simply, without emotional inflection. "I worked for Deloitte before our marriage. I understand financial fraud quite thoroughly." The cognitive dissonance visibly overwhelmed Tom as he struggled to reconcile his perception of me with the reality before him. Federal agents continued their methodical search of our home while he sat rigidly on the sofa, his world collapsing. "In real time?" "The search warrants cover all electronic devices, financial records, and relevant documents," Agent Chen explained, maintaining his professional tone. "Simultaneous operations are currently in progress at your office, storage facilities, and other identified locations. All known accounts have been frozen pending investigation." Tom's attorney arrived within the hour, not Jeffrey Schmidt, his usual corporate counsel, but Patricia Winters, a criminal defense specialist. Her arrival shifted the dynamic subtly, introducing professional legal representation into what had been raw confrontation. "My client will not be making any statements at this time," Patricia announced after a brief private consultation with Tom. "We request clarification on the specific allegations and evidence supporting these extraordinary actions." Agent Chen provided copies of the detailed warrants. "Your client is currently facing potential charges related to tax evasion, wire fraud, money laundering, and securities violations. The evidence includes banking records, communication documentation, client financial statements, and testimony from cooperating witnesses." As Patricia reviewed the warrants, her expression shifted subtly, professional concern deepening as she recognized the comprehensive nature of the case. This wasn't a fishing expedition, but a thoroughly developed federal prosecution supported by substantial evidence. The morning unfolded with methodical precision as agents systematically collected evidence throughout our home. Tom remained silent under his attorney's advice, but his eyes followed me constantly, trying to understand How the woman he had so completely underestimated had orchestrated his downfall. When did you... He started several times, each attempt trailing off as the magnitude of the situation overwhelmed him. The realization seemed to hit in waves, each new team of agents entering with evidence boxes, each mention of another search location, each reference to frozen accounts adding to his comprehension of how completely his world had collapsed. What struck me most was the transformation of his physical presence. The man who had dominated rooms with his confident authority now seemed to shrink into himself. His expensive clothes, usually worn like armor, looked ill-fitting and rumpled. The careful grooming that had been part of his powerful image was already showing signs of neglect. "Mrs. Harrison," Agent Chen approached me as the search neared completion. "We'll need you to come to the field office later today to formalize your statements. For now, do you have arrangements for alternative accommodation?" I nodded, retrieving my pre-packed bag from the guest room closet. The sight of it, clear evidence of premeditation, seemed to hit Tom particularly hard. This wasn't a spontaneous betrayal, but a carefully planned operation. His eyes fixed on the bag, understanding finally dawning that while he had believed himself in complete control, I had been methodically preparing for this moment. "Proves criminal intent," she explained. "Every function, every module was specifically designed to enable and conceal fraud. There's no possible legitimate business purpose for this software." Tom's psychological deterioration accelerated as the consequences mounted. Dr. Morton's profile had predicted this collapse with unsettling accuracy. "The loss of control is particularly devastating for personalities like his," he noted. "The careful systems he built to maintain his illusion of superiority are disintegrating simultaneously. I observed this disintegration from a safe distance, receiving regular updates through our secure network." Tom's attempts to maintain his commanding presence in professional meetings grew increasingly desperate. His usual strategic thinking gave way to reactive panic, each decision making his situation worse. "He's following the classic pattern of high-functioning narcissists under pressure," Dr. Levine explained during one of our sessions. The facade of competence crumbles, revealing the fundamental instability beneath. The very traits that enabled his success, confidence, control, strategic manipulation, are now accelerating his downfall. The investigation expanded beyond our original scope as other agencies joined the case. The SEC launched a parallel inquiry into securities violations. State regulatory boards began examining his professional certifications. Even local authorities opened investigations into property tax irregularities. "This is what we call a cascade failure," Agent Chen explained. "Once the initial evidence exposed his methods, every aspect of his operations came under scrutiny. Each investigation reveals new violations, triggering additional inquiries. The fraudulent foundation he built is collapsing under its own weight." Jennifer's divorce filing, timed perfectly with the federal action, created additional pressure. The comprehensive evidence of financial crimes strengthened my position enormously. "The courts take a particularly dim view of systematic fraud involving marital assets," she noted. "His attempts to hide and divert our joint resources will likely result in highly favorable asset division." Most revealing was Tom's response to the destruction of his carefully constructed world. Rather than accepting responsibility, he became increasingly paranoid, seeing conspiracies in every development. His communications, monitored through court-approved surveillance, showed growing desperation as he tried to maintain control of a situation long since beyond his influence. 3 months after the initial raid, Tom's facade finally cracked completely during a plea negotiation meeting. The evidence against him had become overwhelming. His offshore accounts were frozen, his client fraud exposed, his sophisticated software, systems thoroughly documented as tools of criminal enterprise. "The federal prosecutors are offering a deal," Patricia Winters explained to him, her tone carefully professional. In exchange for full cooperation, including detailed disclosure of all financial activities and assistance in recovering client funds, they're willing to recommend a reduced sentence. I attended the meeting as required by the proceedings, watching as Tom's remaining pretense of control dissolved. The man who had once dominated every room with his presence now seemed physically diminished, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame, dark circles shadowing his eyes. "You never believed I could do this," I said quietly during a break in the negotiations. "You were so convinced of my financial incompetence that you never considered I might not just understand your schemes, but be capable of documenting them systematically." His response revealed the fundamental flaw that had enabled his downfall. "You were supposed to be," he started, then stopped, seemingly unable to complete the thought. The cognitive dissonance was still visible in his expression, the continued struggle to reconcile his perception of me with the reality that had destroyed him. The plea agreement was comprehensive. Tom would acknowledge guilt to multiple federal charges, cooperate fully with ongoing investigations, and assist in recovering assets for defrauded clients. In exchange, prosecutors would recommend a sentence of 57 months in federal prison rather than the potential 15-20 years he faced if convicted at trial. "The terms are more generous than warranted by the evidence," Agent Chen noted during our final briefing. "But his cooperation will help recover significant assets for his victims and provide valuable intelligence about broader financial fraud schemes. Sometimes practical justice outweighs maximum punishment." The divorce settlement reflected similar pragmatic considerations. With his criminal activities thoroughly documented and most assets frozen or seized, Tom had little leverage for negotiation. Jennifer secured a highly favorable division of remaining legitimate assets, along with clear legal protection against any future claims or liabilities. "This resolution achieves our primary objectives," Marcus summarized: criminal accountability, asset recovery for victims, clear legal separation, and protected financial independence for you. The systematic approach we took from the beginning has created comprehensive closure. Dr. Levine helped me process the emotional aspects of this conclusion. "You're not just ending a marriage," she observed. "You're completing a complex operation that required extraordinary psychological discipline. The transition back to normal life deserves as much careful attention as the investigation did." 1 year later, I sat in my new home office, reviewing the final case documents. Tom was serving his sentence at a federal correctional facility. His consulting empire had been dismantled, his fraud exposed, his professional reputation destroyed. The woman he had dismissed as financially naive had orchestrated his complete downfall through the very skills he had denigrated. In the aftermath of Tom's conviction, I found myself rebuilding not just my personal life, but my professional identity. The expertise I had applied to documenting his crimes became the foundation for a consulting practice, specializing in forensic analysis of financial fraud, particularly cases involving spousal deception. Brandon's firm offered me a partnership position heading their new domestic financial crimes division. "Your case has created a template for handling these situations," he explained. "There's growing demand for specialists who understand both the technical and psychological aspects of spousal financial fraud." The transformation was profound. The skills Tom had dismissed as unnecessary became highly valued professional capabilities. My understanding of how fraudulent schemes intertwined with marital dynamics provided unique insights that traditional forensic accountants often missed. Jennifer referred several high-profile cases to me, each involving complex financial deception within marriages. "Your personal experience combined with professional expertise gives you credibility other experts can't match," she noted. "Clients trust someone who's navigated these waters personally." My first major case involved a situation remarkably similar to my own. A husband running sophisticated fraud schemes while dismissing his wife's financial capabilities. Working with federal investigators, we documented systematic tax evasion and client fraud totaling over $12 million. Your approach to evidence collection sets new standards, Agent Chen commented after successful prosecution of that case. The methodical documentation, the attention to psychological patterns, the strategic patience, it's changing how we handle these investigations. The professional resurrection carried a certain poetic justice. The woman Tom had relegated to domestic concerns was now a recognized authority in financial fraud investigation. My case studies were used in training sessions for federal agents. Law enforcement agencies consulted me on complex fraud investigations. Dr. Levine helped me understand the deeper significance of this transformation. You've turned personal trauma into professional expertise, she observed. That's not just healing, it's evolution. You're using your experience to prevent others from suffering similar betrayals. I established strict criteria for accepting cases. Each client received both professional investigative services and connections to support resources, legal counsel, psychological support, financial advisors. The comprehensive approach I had developed during my own case became standard protocol for helping others. The ripple effects of Tom's case extended far beyond our personal situation. The sophisticated nature of his fraud, combined with the methodical way it was documented and prosecuted, created significant changes in how similar cases were handled by law enforcement and regulatory agencies. Brandon's asset recovery team leveraged techniques developed during our investigation to create specialized protocols for identifying and reclaiming funds hidden through offshore mechanisms. The patterns we had documented in Tom's financial movements became red flags for detecting similar schemes. Clara's firm established a dedicated division, providing forensic support for individuals suspecting financial crimes within marriage or business partnerships. Your case demonstrated the need for specialized expertise in these situations, she explained. The intersection of intimate relationships and financial fraud requires unique investigative approaches. Jennifer used insights from our case to develop educational resources helping individuals recognize and document financial abuse. Her practical guides transformed complex forensic techniques into accessible approaches for those without specialized training. Knowledge is protection, she emphasized. The more people understand these patterns, the harder it becomes to perpetrate these frauds. The technical evidence from Tom's case proved particularly valuable for broader fraud prevention. Patricia's analysis of his custom software helped financial institutions improve their detection systems. The sophisticated methods he had developed to evade security protocols now helped strengthen those same protections. The psychological aspects of the case generated significant professional interest. Dr. Morton incorporated our documentation into his research on white-collar criminal behavior. The detailed records of Tom's progression from confidence to collapse provide invaluable insights into how these personalities operate under pressure. Law enforcement agencies began implementing new protocols based on our investigation. Agent Chen developed training programs incorporating lessons from the case. The combination of technical sophistication and intimate betrayal creates unique challenges, he noted. Traditional investigation methods often miss critical evidence in these situations. More personally satisfying was the impact on individual lives. Women in similar situations found hope in my story. The transformation from dismissed wife to forensic specialist resonated deeply with others facing comparable betrayal. 6 months after Tom began serving his sentence, an unexpected discovery revealed the true extent of his self-deception. A thorough review of his earliest business records, conducted as part of an expanded investigation, uncovered evidence that his entire career had been built on fundamental fraud. The documentation showed that his initial success, the consulting breakthrough that had launched his career, was achieved through manipulated data and falsified results. He had created elaborate case studies demonstrating his business efficiency methods, but the underlying numbers were entirely fabricated. This changes our understanding of his psychology. Dr. Morton observed when presented with the findings. He wasn't a successful businessman who turned to fraud. He was a fraudster who created the illusion of business success. The deception was foundational to his identity. This revelation provided crucial context for his dismissal of my financial capabilities. His insistence on controlling all financial matters, his elaborate explanations of business concepts, his condescending attitude toward my professional background, all stemmed from deep insecurity about his own legitimacy. Classic compensation. Behavior, Dr. Levine noted during our discussion of these discoveries. He built increasingly complex fraud schemes to maintain the fiction of his superior expertise. Your genuine financial knowledge represented an existential threat to that fiction. The investigation expanded to review every client engagement throughout his career. Pattern emerged showing systematic fabrication of results. His consulting recommendations, while wrapped in impressive technical language, were often based on manipulated data designed to support predetermined conclusions. This historical fraud created new challenges for client restitution. Many businesses had made significant decisions based on his fraudulent analysis. The financial impact extended far beyond direct theft, encompassing years of misguided business strategies implemented on false premises. Your husband's legacy is more complex than simple financial fraud, Agent Chen commented during a case review. He created an elaborate fiction that influenced business decisions across multiple industries. The full impact may never be fully calculated. Tom's psychological deterioration in prison provided disturbing insights into the true nature of his character. Through monitored communications and supervised visits, we observed the systematic breakdown of the carefully constructed persona he had maintained for decades. Initially, he attempted to maintain his familiar patterns of control and manipulation. His letters to former clients continued to employ the sophisticated financial jargon and confident assertions that had characterized his consulting practice. He wrote to professional contacts as though his imprisonment was a temporary inconvenience, speaking of future projects and continued collaborations. This denial phase is particularly intense, Dr. Morton noted during our review of his communications. The disparity between his current reality and his self-image is creating significant cognitive dissonance. His attempts to maintain his professional persona despite overwhelming evidence of its fraudulent nature suggest deep-seated pathology. As the months progressed, this facade began to crack. His communications became increasingly erratic, shifting between grandiose plans for post-release comeback and bitter accusations of conspiracy against him. The careful articulation that had once impressed clients gave way to rambling dissertations filled with technical errors and logical inconsistencies. We're seeing the emergence of his authentic personality, Dr. Levine explained. The sophisticated fraudster was always a performance, maintained through continuous effort and reinforced by apparent success. Without the external validation of his constructed identity, the underlying psychological instability is becoming evident. Most revealing were his attempts to explain his actions to the court-appointed psychiatrist. Rather than acknowledging fraudulent intent, he constructed elaborate rationalizations portraying his crimes as innovative business practices misunderstood by less sophisticated minds. His description of complex financial strategies revealed fundamental misunderstandings of basic accounting principles. This confirms our earlier assessments, Dr. Morton observed. His apparent expertise was primarily performative. The confidence he projected masked significant gaps in actual knowledge. His dismissal of others' capabilities, particularly yours, was likely projection of his own insecurities. The prison counselor's reports documented increasing difficulty distinguishing between his fabricated narratives and reality. He would speak with absolute conviction about non-existent business empires and offshore holdings, describing in detail assets that had been proven fictional during the investigation. His few remaining professional contacts gradually withdrew, as his communications became more obviously delusional. The carefully maintained network of business relationships that had sustained his fraud dissolved, leaving him increasingly isolated. Each departure seemed to accelerate his psychological decline. Most disturbing were his references to our marriage. In letters to family members, he constructed an alternative history where he had been the victim of manipulation, casting himself as a successful businessman betrayed by an ungrateful wife. These narratives became more elaborate and disconnected from reality over time, incorporating conspiracy theories and impossible scenarios. This level of reality distortion is concerning, Dr. Levine noted after reviewing recent communications. He's not simply denying his actions, he's constructing an entirely fictional life history to preserve his self-image. The extent of this reconstruction suggests significant underlying personality disorder. Prison officials reported increasing incidents of inappropriate behavior during family visits. He would launch into detailed explanations of complex financial strategies to disinterested relatives, becoming agitated when they failed to show proper appreciation for his supposed expertise. These episodes often ended with him being returned to his cell in an agitated state. The psychiatric evaluation ordered by the court revealed patterns consistent with narcissistic personality disorder, complicated by possible delusional features. His absolute conviction in his superior intelligence and financial expertise persisted despite clear evidence of his fundamental misunderstanding of the principles he claimed to master. The comprehensive documentation of his fraud seems to have triggered a psychological crisis, Dr. Morton explained. His entire identity was built around perceived intellectual and professional superiority. The irrefutable evidence that his success was fraudulent has created a break with reality rather than acceptance. The transformation of my professional identity in the years following Tom's conviction exceeded any expectations I had held during the investigation. What began as personal justice evolved into systemic change, creating new approaches to detecting and preventing financial fraud within intimate relationships. Brandon's firm established a specialized division under my leadership, focusing exclusively on cases involving spousal financial deception. We developed comprehensive protocols combining forensic accounting, psychological analysis, and strategic investigation techniques. The methods I had employed in documenting Tom's crimes became the foundation for standardized procedures now used by multiple agencies. Your approach revolutionized how we handle these cases, Brandon noted during our division's first-year review. The integration of financial forensics with psychological profiling creates a more effective investigation model. We're seeing success rates nearly double our previous standards. Our team expanded rapidly, bringing in specialists from various disciplines. Former federal investigators worked alongside forensic accountants and psychological profilers. Each case benefited from multiple perspectives, creating more comprehensive documentation of complex fraud schemes. The professional impact extended beyond direct investigation. Law enforcement agencies began implementing training programs based on our methodologies. I regularly conducted workshops for federal agents, teaching them to recognize the subtle patterns that often indicated spousal financial fraud. Traditional financial crime investigation focuses primarily on technical evidence, Agent Chen explained during one training session. Your methods demonstrate the importance of understanding psychological patterns and relationship dynamics. The technical and emotional elements are often inseparable in these cases. Client success stories accumulated rapidly. Women who had been systematically denied access to financial information found empowerment through our guidance. Men who discovered their business partners were conducting fraud through spousal accounts gained tools for protecting their interests. We established strict ethical guidelines for accepting cases. Each potential client underwent thorough evaluation to ensure their situation warranted our specialized approach. We weren't just investigating fraud. We were helping people reclaim control of their financial lives while ensuring proper legal accountability for perpetrators. Jennifer's legal practice evolved in parallel, developing new strategies for handling divorce cases involving sophisticated financial crimes. Our firms often collaborated, creating comprehensive support for clients facing both criminal fraud and marital dissolution. The intersection of criminal and civil proceedings requires careful coordination, Jennifer observed. Your forensic evidence strengthens divorce negotiations, while our legal actions help preserve assets for criminal restitution. The integrated approach serves both justice and practical recovery. The professional network I had assembled during Tom's investigation expanded into a formal alliance of specialists. Regular conferences brought together experts from various fields to share insights and develop new approaches to combating financial fraud in intimate relationships. Patricia's technical team created sophisticated software tools for detecting patterns similar to those Tom had employed. His methods, while criminal, revealed vulnerabilities in standard financial monitoring systems, she explained. We've used those insights to develop better protection mechanisms. Most gratifying was the opportunity to mentor others entering the field. Young forensic accountants and investigators sought our guidance in developing their skills. Many had personal experiences with financial abuse that drove their professional interests. You've created more than just a successful practice, Dr. Levine noted during one of our regular discussions. You've established a new professional paradigm that combines technical expertise with emotional intelligence. That's transforming how these cases are handled across the industry. 5 years after Tom's conviction, a chance discovery provided the final piece in understanding the complex psychology that had driven his crimes. During a routine review of archived evidence, Brandon's team uncovered early business records that revealed the origin of Tom's fraudulent behavior. These documents, dating back to his first attempts at establishing a consulting practice, showed a pattern of systematic deception that predated our marriage by nearly a decade. His entire professional identity had been constructed on a foundation of falsified credentials and manufactured success stories. The sophistication of his early fraud is remarkable, Dr. Morton observed as we reviewed the findings. He didn't gradually slip into criminal behavior. He built his entire career on deliberate deception. The confidence he projected was a carefully constructed facade hiding fundamental insecurity about his actual capabilities. The records included drafts of his early consulting proposals, showing how he had plagiarized analysis from established firms, modified their results to appear more impressive, and presented them as his own work. His claimed expertise in financial efficiency was itself a fraud, built on stolen ideas and manipulated data. This discovery explained many aspects of his behavior during our marriage: his insistence on controlling all financial matters, his elaborate explanations of basic business concepts, his dismissal of my professional background, all stemmed from deep-seated fear of exposure. My actual expertise in forensic accounting represented an existential threat to his carefully constructed fiction. This adds significant context to his psychological deterioration in prison, Dr. Levine noted. His entire identity was built on perceived intellectual superiority. When that fiction was exposed, he experienced complete psychological collapse rather than face his authentic self. The investigation revealed that Tom had maintained detailed records of his deceptions, creating what amounted to a handbook of fraud techniques. These documents, never intended for discovery, provided disturbing insight into his methodical approach to exploitation and manipulation. He treated fraud as a professional discipline, Agent Chen commented during our final case review. The same attention to detail that made him appear successful in business was actually focused on perfecting techniques of deception. Every relationship, every interaction was potentially exploitable in his worldview. This understanding brought a kind of closure I hadn't realized I needed. The man I had married never truly existed. He was a carefully constructed character, performed by someone who had built his entire life around deception. The skills I had used to expose his crimes had protected me from becoming completely ensnared in his fictional narrative. The implications extended beyond our personal story. The The comprehensive documentation of Tom's methods now serves as a case study in law enforcement training, helping investigators recognize similar patterns of systematic fraud disguised as professional expertise. Your experience demonstrates why traditional financial crime investigation often misses sophisticated fraud within marriages, Brandon observed. The perpetrators aren't just hiding transactions, they're maintaining complete fictional identities. Understanding that psychology is crucial to effective detection and prevention. Looking back, I recognize that exposing Tom's crimes wasn't just about personal justice or financial recovery. It was about dismantling a system of exploitation that relied on dismissing and diminishing others' capabilities. The woman he had underestimated had not only uncovered his fraud, but transformed that experience into positive change for others facing similar situations. The professional identity I have built in the years since his conviction represents more than career success. It stands as living proof that authentic expertise, ethical behavior, and genuine accomplishment ultimately triumph over carefully constructed deception. That truth, more than any legal victory, feels like true justice. The ripple effects of Tom's case transformed how financial institutions approach fraud detection within marriage and intimate partnerships. Major banks and investment firms began implementing new protocols specifically designed to identify patterns, similar to those he had employed. The sophisticated nature of his schemes had exposed critical vulnerabilities in existing security systems. Patricia's technical team developed advanced monitoring algorithms based on the patterns discovered in Tom's fraud. His methods revealed blind spots in traditional fraud detection, she explained during a presentation to federal regulators. The assumption that married couples share financial interests had created vulnerabilities that criminals could exploit. We've redesigned detection systems to recognize potential spousal financial abuse. The new systems looked for subtle indicators that might suggest hidden financial manipulation, unusual patterns in joint account access, systematic exclusion of one spouse from financial decisions, and complex transaction chains that obscured true ownership became red flags for further investigation. Financial institutions adopted mandatory training programs for their staff, teaching them to recognize potential spousal financial abuse. The case studies drawn from Tom's methods provided concrete examples of how seemingly legitimate transactions could mask systematic fraud. The traditional approach to marital finances assumed good faith between partners, Brandon noted during an industry conference. Tom's case demonstrated how that assumption could enable sophisticated criminal enterprises. The new protocols balance privacy rights with necessary protective oversight. The regulatory impact extended beyond banking. Insurance companies revised their fraud detection methods, particularly for policies involving married couples. Investment firms implemented additional verification requirements for major transactions affecting joint assets. Real estate agencies developed new protocols for property transfers between spouses. The changes weren't limited to institutional policies. Legal frameworks evolved to address the complexities revealed by Tom's case. Several states modified their divorce statutes to better handle situations involving sophisticated financial crimes. The intersection of criminal fraud and marital asset division received increased judicial attention. Your case created precedents for handling complex financial fraud within marriage, Jennifer explained during a legal symposium. Courts now better understand how criminal schemes can exploit marital trust. This has led to more nuanced approaches to asset recovery and division in these situations. Professional organizations updated their ethical guidelines and training requirements. The American Institute of CPAs developed specific certification programs for forensic accountants handling cases of spousal financial fraud. Law enforcement agencies created specialized units focusing on financial crimes within intimate relationships. The impact on client protections was particularly significant. Tom's exploitation of his consulting relationships led to enhanced due diligence requirements for financial advisors. Professional service firms implemented stronger verification protocols for consultants' credentials and track records. The systematic nature of Tom's fraud demonstrated how professional expertise could be weaponized, Agent Chen observed. His case led to fundamental changes in how we verify and monitor professional credentials in financial services. Educational. Institutions incorporated lessons from the case into their curricula. Business schools used it to teach ethical decision-making and fraud detection. Psychology programs studied it to understand the intersection of personality disorders and financial crime. Most importantly, the changes helped protect others from similar exploitation. Banks reported increased detection of potential spousal financial abuse. Law enforcement noted better cooperation from financial institutions in investigating these cases. Support services for victims became more readily available and better coordinated. A year into Tom's sentence, Patricia's team made a breakthrough in understanding his fraud systems that transformed financial crime prevention. The sophisticated software he had developed to manage his criminal enterprise became the foundation for new security protocols designed to prevent similar schemes. What's fascinating is how his code reveals his psychology, Patricia explained during a detailed analysis session. He built redundancies into everything, multiple layers of deception, all automated to maintain his fiction of success. Each function contains embedded rationalizations, comments explaining why the fraud was actually innovative business practice. The technical analysis revealed systems far more sophisticated than initially suspected. Tom had created automated routines that monitored normal business patterns and adjusted fraudulent transactions to avoid detection. His software could analyze banking algorithms and modify its behavior to stay below fraud detection thresholds. He essentially created an artificial intelligence focused on fraud, Patricia noted. The system learned from each successful deception, refining its methods based on what worked. This explains how he managed to sustain the fraud for so long. The software was constantly evolving to avoid detection. This discovery led to a complete overhaul of financial monitoring systems at major institutions. The very methods Tom had used to evade detection now informed new security measures. His automated pattern matching became the basis for enhanced fraud detection algorithms. We're using his own techniques against similar schemes, Agent Chen explained. The sophisticated evasion methods he developed helped us understand vulnerabilities in current systems. Every attempt he made to hide criminal activity revealed another point where detection could be improved. The investigation of Tom's code also uncovered evidence of other criminal enterprises using similar methods. His software had inadvertently created signatures that helped identify comparable fraud schemes. Financial institutions began finding patterns they had previously missed. It's ironic, Brandon observed. His obsession with documenting everything, even in code, created a roadmap for detecting others using similar techniques. The very sophistication he was so proud of became a tool for prevention. Most revealing were the system's adaptive capabilities. Tom had programmed it to learn from close calls, automatically adjusting its methods when fraud detection systems got too close. This artificial intelligence approach to crime revealed new vulnerabilities in financial security. The code contained extensive documentation of his thought process, hidden in technical comments and system logs. These records provided unprecedented insight into the psychology of financial crime, revealing how a sophisticated fraudster rationalized and systematized their deceptions. The commentary in his code is like a confession he never meant anyone to read, Patricia said. Every function has detailed notes explaining why traditional ethics didn't apply to him, how his superior understanding justified the deception. It's a psychological profile written in programming language. 18 months after Tom's conviction, Maria's investigation into his offshore networks revealed connections to larger international fraud operations. His sophisticated financial movements had intersected with organized criminal enterprises. Though he had likely remained unaware of these connections, he was essentially providing money laundering services without realizing it. Maria explained during an emergency briefing. His complex transaction chains created perfect vehicles for other criminal organizations to move funds. They used his legitimate-appearing business operations as cover for their own activities. The discovery sparked multiple international investigations. Law enforcement agencies from 6 countries became involved, tracing how criminal organizations had piggybacked on Tom's financial networks. His obsession with creating elaborate movement patterns had inadvertently established perfect laundering channels. The irony is remarkable, Agent Chen noted. His belief in his superior intelligence led him to create unnecessarily complex financial structures. These complications made his channels ideal for other criminal enterprises to exploit. His ego essentially created a money laundering infrastructure. The investigation revealed that several of Tom's trusted offshore contacts were actually fronts for organized crime. The banks he had carefully chosen for their discretion were selected precisely because they serviced criminal enterprises. His attempt to appear sophisticated had led him directly into criminal networks. He was playing in a much deeper pool than he realized, Brandon observed. While he thought he was cleverly gaming the system, actual criminal organizations were using his activities as cover. Every elaborate financial maneuver he created opened another channel they could exploit. The international scope of the investigation created new challenges. Multiple jurisdictions meant competing legal requirements and investigative priorities. Coordination became crucial to maintain the integrity of both ongoing investigations and eventual prosecutions. Your husband's activities inadvertently revealed previously hidden criminal networks, Maria explained. His meticulous documentation of his own crimes created a paper trail exposing much larger operations. The very complexity he was so proud of became a map of international financial crime. The discovery added new dimensions to the prosecutor's case against Tom. While he hadn't knowingly collaborated with criminal organizations, his sophisticated fraud schemes had facilitated their operations. The impact of his crimes extended far beyond personal enrichment or client fraud. Most disturbing was how easily criminal enterprises had identified and exploited his networks. His attempts to appear worldly and sophisticated through international banking relationships had actually signaled vulnerability to organized crime. The more complex he made his financial movements, the more attractive they became as vehicles for money laundering. 2 years after Tom's conviction, the comprehensive documentation of his fraud became the foundation for revolutionary changes in financial education and professional training. Business schools and law enforcement academies incorporated detailed case studies based on his methods, transforming how future professionals learned to recognize and prevent financial crimes. The thoroughness of your documentation created unprecedented teaching opportunities, Jennifer explained during a lecture at a prestigious law school. We can trace the evolution of sophisticated fraud from simple beginnings through increasingly complex iterations. It's a complete roadmap of how financial crimes develop and escalate. The educational impact extended beyond traditional financial training. Psychology programs studied the relationship between personality disorders and systematic fraud. Business ethics courses use Tom's rationalizations to illustrate how moral compromise progressively erodes into criminal behavior. His case perfectly demonstrates the intersection of capability and character, Dr. Morton noted during a professional conference. Technical skills without ethical foundation become tools for exploitation. The sophisticated methods he developed to manage his fraud show how intelligence without integrity becomes a destructive force. Law enforcement training programs particularly benefited from the detailed evidence. Agent Chen developed specialized courses teaching investigators how to recognize patterns similar to Tom's methods. The psychological insights gained from his case helped officers understand the mindset of sophisticated financial criminals. Traditional law enforcement training focused primarily on technical aspects of financial crime, Chen explained. Your husband's case demonstrated the importance of understanding psychological patterns and relationship dynamics. We now teach investigators to look for behavioral indicators alongside financial evidence. Professional certification programs updated their requirements to include specific training on detecting spouse-enabled fraud. Accounting organizations developed new ethical guidelines addressing the unique challenges of family financial crimes. Banking associations created specialized certifications for professionals handling complex fraud investigations. Most significantly, the case transformed how financial abuse within relationships was understood and addressed. Support organizations used insights from Tom's methods to help other victims recognize signs of systematic financial exploitation. The psychological patterns revealed in his documentation helped create early warning systems for detecting similar abuse. Your experience created a template for understanding how financial abuse operates in privileged relationships, Dr. Levine observed. The progression from controlling behavior to systematic fraud often follows patterns similar to what you documented. This understanding helps others recognize dangerous situations before they escalate. The educational impact reached beyond professional training into public awareness. Media coverage of the case helped expose how financial criminals use relationship dynamics to enable fraud. Public education programs incorporated lessons learned from Tom's methods to teach financial literacy and fraud awareness. Universities began offering specialized courses studying the intersection of personality disorders, relationship dynamics, and financial crime. The detailed psychological profile developed during Tom's case provided unique insights into how narcissistic personalities rationalize and systematize criminal behavior. The academic value of this case is extraordinary, Dr. Morton explained. We can trace how personality pathology manifests in financial behavior, how cognitive distortions enable progressive criminal activity, and how sophisticated intelligence can serve destructive psychological patterns. 5 years after Tom began his sentence, a final discovery provided the missing piece that completed our understanding of his psychology and methods. During a routine review of archived evidence, Brandon's team found an encrypted journal hidden deep in Tom's digital files. The contents revealed the full extent of his self-deception and the elaborate fiction he had constructed about his own identity. This isn't just a record of criminal activity, Dr. Morton explained as we reviewed the decrypted contents. It's a detailed chronicle of how he created and maintained his fictional persona. Every aspect of his public identity was carefully constructed and constantly refined. The level of conscious manipulation is remarkable. The journal entries dated back to his earliest career attempts, documenting how he had systematically built his professional image. Each success, each client relationship, each business achievement was cataloged alongside detailed notes about how he had manufactured or manipulated the results. His entire career was revealed as an elaborate performance. What's most striking is his awareness of the deception, Dr. Levine noted. This wasn't someone who gradually slipped into fraudulent behavior or convinced himself his lies were true. He maintained a clear understanding of the difference between his manufactured identity and reality, while continuously choosing to expand the deception. The technical sophistication revealed in his private writings far exceeded what we had previously understood. Tom had created detailed systems for maintaining his various deceptions, including elaborate contingency plans for different discovery scenarios. The only situation he hadn't prepared for was being exposed by someone he had completely underestimated. Your husband's dismissal of your capabilities was ultimately his greatest vulnerability, Agent Chen observed. He planned for every possibility except the most obvious, that the woman he systematically undervalued would recognize and document his crimes. His own prejudices created the blind spot that enabled his downfall. Most revealing were his writings about our marriage. The journal showed how he had specifically chosen me for my financial background, seeing it as perfect cover for his activities. He believed that marrying someone with legitimate financial expertise, then systematically undermining their confidence and controlling their access to information, would help disguise his fraud. This level of calculated manipulation in partner selection is unusual, Dr. Morton explained. Most financial criminals opportunistically exploit existing relationships. Your husband deliberately chose a partner based on how their credentials could enhance his deception, then systematically work to neutralize their actual capabilities. The discovery of this journal transformed our understanding of similar cases. The detailed recording of his methods and psychology provided unprecedented insight into how sophisticated financial criminals operate within intimate relationships. His writings became a valuable resource for law enforcement and mental health professionals working to prevent similar crimes. The completeness of his documentation, while disturbing, creates extraordinary learning opportunities, Jennifer noted. We can trace the development of complex financial fraud from initial conception through various iterations. Every rationalization, every tactical adjustment, every response to close calls is recorded in detail. The journal's contents also helped other victims understand their experiences. The calculated nature of his manipulation, clearly recorded, in his own words, demonstrated how financial abuse operates as a systematic campaign rather than a series of isolated incidents. His detailed planning showed how abusers use intimate relationships to enable broader criminal enterprises. Looking back, I recognize that exposing Tom's crimes wasn't just about personal justice or financial recovery. It was about documenting and dismantling a sophisticated system of exploitation that relied on dismissing and diminishing others' capabilities. The woman he had underestimated had not only uncovered his fraud, but transformed that experience into positive change for others. Facing similar situations,